Okay, welcome. My name is Katrina Morgan, and I will be the host for today's Meet a Mathematician event. The title is Meet a Mathematician, a conversation. Okay, welcome. My name is Katrina Morgan, and I will be the host for today's Meet a Mathematician. Figure out where that's coming from. Sorry. The title of today's event is Meet a Mathematician, a conversation with Suzanne Weeks and Caroline Wong. Caroline Wong appears to be running a little bit late today, so we'll get started with Suzanne Weeks. And before we get started, I just want to talk a little bit about the Girls Talk Math program that this event is a part of. So Girls Talk Math is a free math and media camp for high school girls and gender nonconforming students. It was started in 2016 by myself and Francesca Bernardi when we were both graduate students at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Then in 2018, Sarah Burnett, who had been an undergraduate at the University of North Carolina, started a sister camp at the University of Maryland, where she is now a graduate student. And this year we are doing a special online version of the program, so a fully virtual camp. And we have 4 different organizing groups from different institutions across the country. We have folks from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, the University of Maryland, the University of Minnesota, and the University of California, Los Angeles. And we have about 60 campers, each coming from the kind of geographical regions around where the organizers are from. And they meet with us twice a week to work on problem sets, which cover different fun mathematical topics. This year they're learning about RSA encryption cryptography, knot theory, and patterns and fractals. And as part of our new online programming, we have added in these 4 public events. This is the 3rd event so far, and our next event will be a week from today on Saturday, August 1st, and we'll be having a college admissions panel, so information about applying to universities for anyone who is interested. You can go to our website, girlstalkmath.com, and click on the public events link to find out more information and register. And if you are interested in an event, but you missed the live stream on Saturday at 4 p.m., we are also posting videos to our YouTube channel. Great, so with that, Dr. Weeks, if you'd like to just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I hope everybody is awake and ready to have a conversation. My name is Suzanne Weeks, and I'm a professor of mathematical sciences at Worcester Polytechnic Institute. We just call ourselves WPI, which is in Worcester, Massachusetts. We're a private university focused on science, technology, and engineering and mathematics. I'm a professor of mathematical sciences, and I'm also the Associate Dean of Undergraduate Studies at WPI. And I'm so happy to be able to be here and to talk math with a bunch of girls, right? So I'm gonna be hearing mostly from Katrina, but she's channeling a lot of your questions, and I hope I can answer them in a way that's helpful. And I'm looking forward to getting even more questions in the chat, maybe as time goes on.
Great. Yes, and we're very happy to have you here. Yeah, we've collected some questions from our campers and our volunteers this week, so I will be, the voice saying them now, but these questions are coming from our campers. And so we'll go ahead and start with we had a lot of questions about sort of the path to your job. So let's maybe start with, did you know that you wanted to have this job when you were in high school?
Okay, so did I know if I wanted to have this job in high school? Not quite so. I think I enjoyed math, so I was keen on doing something with mathematics. I enjoyed science as well and physics. And I had a touch of computer science when I was in high school. And so when I went to university, and some part of my head said, oh, I'll be a dentist. And the other part of me said, oh, I'm just going to keep doing a lot of math. And I also did a lot of computer science. So I have a minor in computer science, which means I haven't done enough to be a major in computer science, but I've done quite a bit in computer science. And after that, did I know then that I wanted to be a professor? Not necessarily. What I did know is I wanted to keep doing some math. At some point along the way, I decided I'd love to have a PhD, Doctor of Philosophy. So that's why I'm Dr. Suzanne Weeks. I'm not a medical doctor, but a PhD. And so I went to graduate school at the University of Michigan, and I did some summer jobs at IBM. And so that was an option for me as well, working not in higher ed at a university, but also at a company. But I just continued doing math, staying in education. Then I became a professor. But even as a professor, the particular thing that I do is I do dabble a little bit in industry outside academia, because I like to talk and work with people and work on research problems that originate in the world outside of academia sometimes. So that's why in some of my bio, I think everybody may have gotten some sort of version of my bio. It talks about working on real world problems and helping to make that connection between academia and what we do in university and high schools with real problems that actually require a lot of mathematics and statistics background. But getting back to the question, I think I knew I wanted to do something a little bit in education. So at one point I thought I'd be a teacher. At one point I thought I'd be vice president of IBM, even way before I even worked at IBM. At some point, a flight of fancy, I thought I'm going to be a model, but this is where I am, and I'm okay.
Nice. So it sounds like you in high school already had an interest in math, but you didn't know necessarily specifically what form that was going to take.
Right.
What made you interested in math? Was that sort of something that happens from a young age?
Yeah.
Anything in particular?
So I think, so I enjoyed math. It helped that I was good at math. And you know what really helps, and I like to encourage this with my own children. I have a 13-year-old daughter and a 16-year-old daughter. If they talk about math, like I'm just talking about homework. I'm not talking about memorizing digits of pi, something I've never done, and all that kind of stuff, or even doing competitions. I'm just talking about even homework, discussing homework with your friends. And especially for me, so sometimes if I was a little bit further ahead, helping to explain problems to friends and helping people with their work, that's extremely helpful, because it helps me to really go back and see if I understand it. And it's more fun, when you can talk to people about things and your friends are grateful and they may help you with something else. So definitely, so that was really helpful, right? And then, of course, I had teachers who recognized that I enjoyed it, and teachers who would say, oh, how about you guys work? There are a couple of us. Why don't you guys start reading this and work on a couple of problems a little bit ahead? Not all the way ahead, anything like that, but it just kept us from being bored, or it just kept us engaged. And again, I was able to do as a teenager, some chemistry, some physics, and all these things, incorporate some math in them. And really what I like is the logical thinking in mathematics. I mean, I have no passion for adding and subtracting and multiplying, right? That's just arithmetic, but it's the logical part of things and putting things together. So that was fun, but it helps when people encourage you and they recognize you and give you something fun to do, right? I do not consider arithmetic the same as math. So actually give you interesting problems to work on,
Yeah, and I like that advice about talking about it with people. That's certainly something that we try to get the campers to do in our program.
Great,
yes,
good.
And that's part of what makes it fun, like you're saying, that it should be
exactly
enjoyable.
Yeah, it's a community thing,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So our campers also had some questions about kind of how you came to be in this particular job, if there was any person or event that inspired you, and sort of what drew you to where you are today.
Okay. So, right. So when I was in high school, for example, I had one particular teacher that I think of who recognized I was good in math, and gave me a newspaper clipping about being an actuary. Okay, so this is a long time ago, before you guys were even born. But I never knew what an actuary was, but at least I had something at that point to understand that an actuary is somebody with a solid math background who works on problems involving risk, right? I had other teachers who said, oh, you should become a medical doctor, right? But people who help recognize your interests and show you the way that you may want to go, okay? So right, that's high school. And then as I said, in college, when I was an undergraduate, I majored in math and I liked computers. And then it's like, oh, let's keep going. Let's go to graduate school. And the program that I went to was mathematics, but it's mathematics and scientific computing. So it did work on, I have a lot of what's called numerical analysis and computing, and again, trying to solve real problems, but using the computer to help you solve those problems and designing the right kind of algorithms for solving those problems. I did an internship. So one summer, like I said, I went and worked at IBM and some other places. So I just kept going. And then surrounded by professors this whole time. So I kept on that route and I became a professor. But even as my first job, which was at Texas A&M University, we collaborated with people from ExxonMobil, looking at oil production and the best way to retrieve oil from the subsurface. So I like that. I like doing mathematics that has application to real world problems. And then I came to WPI, where I am, where they're engineers and scientists, and it's really easy to mix with all these different sort of people with applications. So again, I enjoyed being at a university and being a professor to work with students and help do research with students. So have students working on projects in mathematics, different types of mathematics, different types of problems. So I've enjoyed that. I've enjoyed teaching. And now, and I've been an associate department head. I'm now associate dean of undergraduate studies. And so now that's putting me more of a leadership and administrative role at the university. And I also like that because I think my skills are, when you reflect on yourselves after a while, you do different things, you get involved with different things. I think helping doing leadership, administrative things, help setting up new programs or leading new initiatives and making decisions that help everyone. I also enjoy doing that sort of things. But it's experience, and as you go along, and I like to try new things, right? It's a little scary at the beginning, but trying new things gives you great exposure. And the worst thing that happens at the end of it is, hey, I've learned some stuff that I didn't know before. And that helps you learn a lot of things and maybe choose what direction you're going.
When you finished your PhD, did you know you wanted to stay in academia?
I did not. I think I just kept on that path because that's what most people did. Yeah. But even in my first position, I did contemplate leaving academia for various reasons. Maybe things weren't going so well. I'm like, I'm not really winning. I didn't feel like I was winning the game necessarily. So I did contemplate leaving. But then talking about people who, people come into your life and you do some work with them and they say, just one or two people saying, hey, good job. I like what you're doing, can keep you going for another day, another month, another semester. So that's what happened. And then again, I was able to get this great gig at WPI. I interviewed many places, but when I interviewed, I knew that WPI was a place I wanted to be in. I was fortunate enough for that match to work. And so I did end up at this university where I am now. And I've been here for a long time, 22 years. You never know what's next, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I always like hearing people's stories of how they found themselves where they are, because I think, when I was younger, I assumed that everything was much more linear than it is.
Right.
Oh, they knew what they wanted and they said it and then they did it, and right. It seems like a pretty rare experience.
Right. No. So when I give advice in different forums for different types of talks, I say, what advice do I give in general? I say, show up, sit in front, raise your hand, and I forget what the other thing is, right? Make friends is probably the other one.
Yeah.
So which is probably the advice you'd get the first day of kindergarten or the first day of high school, or the first day of middle school. But showing up for me is being present in whatever you're doing. Sit in front, really be present, really pay attention, raise your hand. So if there are new opportunities, like I said, my viewpoint is maybe I can make the time for this. And the worst thing that can happen when I put my hand up for and I mean, I'm putting my hand up. Of course, you put your hand up in class to ask questions or answer questions, and that's me all day, every day. But also is volunteering to be on a committee or volunteering to help with something different. The worst thing that can happen is I can meet new people. That's a great thing to happen. Or I can learn new things, right? So just be engaged and be present and take advantage of opportunities that are offered to you, right? And your path doesn't have to be one boring path. You'll get involved in different things along the way. And then it makes you a more interesting person, right? You have more stories to tell.
So. Yeah. I like that perspective on it. So you've talked to us a little bit already about what your job looks like and what your research is, but there are some questions about kind of how you actually use computers in your problems and what types of problems you're interested in.
Okay. So I had mentioned a little bit about what I would call subsurface flow, about looking at the best way that this was years ago. I haven't done that recently, but best way of retrieving oil or dealing with pollutants in the subsurface. And subsurface means in the ground, in the soil, no matter how deep. If you're trying to clean things up in the subsurface, maybe you're injecting particular, chemicals or substances. If you know what the porosity is, how porous the soil is, or the medium of the soil, how permeable it is, what's the best way to lay things out, to push out the good stuff that you want, to leave the bad stuff, or to clean things up. And by using computer simulations and computer models to describe some of the dynamics that's going on. So first take a mathematical description of what's going on, and there are equations that we use called differential equations. That's one type of model. And then I can't solve those equations by hand, right? People think, oh, in mathematics, you solve everything by hand, or you can't. No, I can get approximate solutions though, if I have nice computer simulations to do that. Anyway, so that's one sort of example. The other example that's more accessible and people can understand is I've worked a little bit with students, right, with some undergraduate students in the field of cancer modeling. So looking at, they're looking at the population of cancer cells in certain situations, like in the brain or whatever, in certain environments. And again, there are these sorts of equations, differential equations I can use to model, if I have this much oxygen, the cancer cells are going to grow at this rate. But if I have this many nutrients, the cancers are going to grow at this rate. If I have this much toxins or this concentration of toxins, the cancer cells are going to die at these rates. And by the way, these rates come from biological experiments and other sorts of experiments. So you have to work with scientists and get information from the scientific literature that you're reading or directly from scientists for those numbers. But anyway, so you may want to know what is the effect of the environment. Let's say it's cancer in the brain environment. If you have this, this concentration of toxins or this blood supply, what happens to the population of cancer? How many of them, what fraction of the population dies? What fraction of the population is dividing? What fraction of the population is moving? And if you can describe some of those by ordinary differential equations or what's called partial differential equations, that's great. You've come up with a nice, decent model. You can't solve it by hand again, but using numerical discretization and putting that on a computer and getting a computer algorithm to give you approximate solutions, you can get some idea of the evolution of things and the numbers of cancer cells. So that's how it comes in. And I'm happy to ask, if that wasn't clear, I'm happy to expand on that some more. But there are different types of, so if you don't mind, girls, one thing, some words that I'd like you to pursue, if it's not today sometimes, but mathematical models. That's a fun thing to do, mathematical models and using mathematics to describe things, right? And even as I talked about the modeling of cancer growth and using a model to model cancer growth, one particular model only considers a certain level of detail. Another model may consider a different level of details, and you're asking different questions from your different models. There's no model that captures everything, right? The reality of what goes on in biology is too immense and too huge and too magnificent. But if you're looking, but maybe we can make some assumptions and say, we're just looking at this piece, how they fit together, and try and look at a model of that situation. Okay, my answers are long, but.
No, that's great.
Sorry.
Thank you for, being willing to share all the detail. And can you say a little bit about how you choose the types of questions you ask and like the types of problems?
The types of problems. Whatever seems interesting, and then I can tell you some of the projects I work on with students. It depends on, I like to go out and talk to companies, different companies, and see what problems they have. So, and so it depends on what problems, what companies say, oh yes, I would like to work with some of your students on these problems. And then if I'm getting involved, it's usually a problem that I have some little expertise or knowledge on, but then some we have to learn completely new things. So I worked with a younger faculty member on some students, was it last summer? I think it was last summer, on some problems that we got from Pfizer Pharmaceutical, looking at a model of blood clotting and how the different chemicals in the body and the different dynamics in the body and what's going on affected blood clots and various other things. And so understanding the software platform that we were using, a little bit about differential equations, how to incorporate that, that was interesting. But there was a lot of biology that had to be learned, right? So the students were all over that, and I was amazed that they could retain all the biology. And then there are other problems that I've worked on that have nothing to do with these differential equations that I was talking about, but may have to do with, so like what I call vehicle routing problem. Maybe, I don't know if you've talked about this summer, problems like traveling salesman problem. I don't know, that's something you can always Google, called traveling salesman problem. It's related to that, but it's about routing of drones, right? Unmanned aerial vehicles, taking a route for these drones to fly from place to place. I can get into that at another time, what that problem is about. How do I choose the problems? I have a little bit of knowledge about it, and maybe there's an expert around. And the other thing that's really important comes back to what we said at the very beginning, which is you don't have to do this alone, right? So I may know a little bit and find this interesting, but there's a buddy biologist that I know who helps explain some of the biology or help explain some of the math or the computing. Or there's with that drone and problem I was talking about, I may not be the expert, I may have some knowledge, but I have another colleague in the department or another department that knows a lot more and is helpful to and is willing to work with me. And so now I get to know that person well, professionally and personally, and we have fun working together with the students. So it's the nice thing about math is you can some of the same fundamental mathematics can be applied to different types of problems. And then you add on layers because of the specificity of that problem, but sometimes the underlying starting mathematics can be the same for different problems. So I mentioned something called as a classic problem called the traveling salesman problem. So you can look that up, boom. But then now I'm using some of that knowledge to apply to a problem about drones and refueling and without getting into it about giving supplies or whatever, or hovering over possible landslide zones without going into it. But the point is, one's talking about a salesman, one's talking about a drone and landslides, but same beginning mathematics. Okay.
Yeah, that's great. That's interesting to hear how you interact with different kind of industries outside of academia to drive some of that. It's well with what you were talking about earlier about the importance of like talking with people and
absolutely
having these conversations.
Yeah,
that's very cool. So I guess Lauren, sort of your job, can you talk some about, so we had an interview 2 weeks ago with some other mathematicians, and they touched a little bit on the fact that as a professor, you kind of wear a lot of different hats, and your research is a big part, but certainly not the only part of your work, and you've talked about some of your other responsibilities. So what does sort of like a typical day or week for you look like, and what are sort of the different
all right
things you take
on? A typical day is complicated. It could be. So
it is a typical day.
Yeah. So the last few months I have not been teaching, but I have been fully working. And of course, a typical day in the era of COVID means get up, get showered, run downstairs, sit in front of Zoom, maybe have something to eat. But all right. So right now, a typical day may start with I have a lot of meetings, a lot of conversations with other people, and we. So let me make this try and sound a little bit interesting. But it's a lot of meetings. Let me give you an idea of what this Monday looks like. And I'm actually going to pull up my phone. Okay, so I'm going to give you a typical day, and I'm going to pick this Monday. Great. So right. So I'm going to start my day working on helping to plan for what the fall semester looks like when students come back to campus, right? So I'm helping with regards to that as associate dean and all these things, and also helping my department in particular, because, for example, things are not, and even at your schools right now, trust me, your principal and vice principal, they're working hard at this, because it's not your typical reopening, because now we're in the era of COVID-19, so the social distancing and the cleaning, it's actually pretty complicated, but we're all doing our best to make sure things are safe and healthy. So I spent some time working on that. I also have been involved as part of my associate dean. One of the big part of my job is facilitating research for our undergraduates. And so I have about 40 something students that I work with who are working with different faculty around the university that I've helped facilitate that relationship. And so I have a meeting to talk about how that's been going and giving advice to another group of people who want to do some other stuff later in the fall. And then I'm working on a website to showcase what students are doing. So that's another hour meeting with my assistant. And then cool part is I actually have a meeting with those 40 something students I was talking about. So now we're into the afternoon. So we're going to have a Zoom meeting with the 40 something students from different departments who are working on research. And I've been running a professional development series. And so they've been learning about a range of things. But something a little bit out of the norm is we're going to be doing a little bit on financial literacy. And I have someone I know from on campus who does that, who's coming, right? So all those connections, connecting with people. So they're going to do that. And let's see. What else? And then I'm going to do some math stuff with my daughter and her friends. That's on the side. And then I am also preparing, because I have to give a talk to new young faculty members on Thursday. So sometime during the day, I'm going to have to prepare a PowerPoint presentation. And is this enough? Is that day enough?
Yeah. So yes, thank you. I like the very literal.
Yes, I know. I thought, let me be literal.
So. That's great. Yeah, I think it's funny you commenting that you're not teaching right now. I know sometimes like my family and friends, when I comment on periods where I'm not teaching, they're just like, oh, so you just like don't have your job right now? There's so much more to it than that.
Right, and that's what I wanted to explain. Just because I don't have a class of students, there's still a lot going on.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay?
Yeah. Still responsibilities. So another question that one of our campers asked was about work-life balance. So as you just heard, obviously you have a lot going on at any given time, and then during the semester there's just even more with class. So how do you manage balancing that with having a family and
So I've been a WPI, right? A professor at WPI for 22 years. and my children are 13 and 16. And I like to say my kids were pretty much raised on the WPI campus. I personally just happen to live 1.5 miles from WPI, so that's helpful. But my children went to daycare near to WPI when they were very little. There was one summer I had my 3-month-old, 2-month-old baby literally with me in the office one summer because I was associate head and the department head was away. So I don't have a sharp boundary between work and home. I have, when my children were babies or even now, sometimes I have to travel for work, travel to go to conferences. And depending on where it is, where I go, I sometimes bring my family. Usually if I bring it's probably both kids rather than just one. And my children are just used to this. So a balance, right? So I had told myself a couple of years ago, I don't talk about balance because balance sometimes makes people think it's static. So I like to think of it as a dynamic. Sometimes one may take precedence from the other, and then so one is more pressing than the other, and so it comes up, right? So it's somewhat of a dynamic. And I know some of you may think, because I did see a question that said I may have a job where I cannot have a family, and I can't picture what that job might be. But for sure, what I would say is there's no perfect or ideal time to have a family. So let me be more specific too. Let's say to have children. Let me talk about having children in particular. I don't know if there's an absolute perfect time, right? I guess the advice I give my children is for sure wait until, you finish with university and you have a solid job. That's at least the minimum I would like them to focus on. But to say, this moment, once I've achieved this particular rank at my company is the right time, or I've seen people do it all different ways. And I'm sure that everybody's parents have different stories, and you're all here and you've managed to do okay. So, but I would hate to rule out not having a family because of a job. I think we're all making our way in this world and there's no one size fits all. And even if today you look around and let's say that there's a particular job that people don't usually, it's so stressful or so busy, people don't have children, maybe you're the one to change that dynamic so people can live fulfilling lives or have the choices to make. So don't make any such decision now. So I'm going to steal Nike's saying, just do it. We'll figure it out. But I don't have any click advice, but make it work.
No, I like that it's just, there's no one size fits all way to do it, but just if you want to do what you want and you'll figure it out, you'll make it work.
Yep. And ask for always, and that's another thing in my saying thing. Ask for what you need. There's not much harm in asking for what you need. There's also, you have to be a little bit, take a breath, and you can also ask for help when you need it, right? Ask for help from whomever.
Yes, that's so important.
Yeah.
Get stuck in that.
Yep.
So we also had a question about, so last week we had a workshop on imposter syndrome. And one of the questions was if you have ever experienced imposter syndrome, and if so, how did you overcome it? Right.
So great. So thanks for asking that. So with regards to imposter syndrome, I would say absolutely. And so Katrina, please correct me if I'm thinking about imposter syndrome incorrectly. But for me, when I think of imposter syndrome, it's those times when I feel I don't know as much as everybody else. And so I guess imposter syndrome would mean I don't know as much as everybody else. And people think I know more than I do and I'm just pretending. Does that have to be part of it? Okay.
So I think the way the folks who came into the workshop last week from the University of Maryland defined it was talking about there are a lot of different ways that it can present itself, but those are certainly thoughts that come along with it, and also talked about it in the sense of like whether or not you belong, you feel like you belong in a community.
Mhm.
I think
Right.
that's everything you're saying are elements of it.
Okay. So I've certainly felt that I don't know as much as other people about, let's say this particular mathematics, or you're going to a talk and someone's talking and I'm like, I understood the first 10 minutes, but I don't understand the rest, and everybody else seems to understand the rest. Or people think I know more than I do. I don't know if I've had that problem that much. But with regards to not knowing as much as I think everybody else does, I kind of, it takes a while, but I kind of let go of that and said, well, I understand what I understand. And I remember the moment I decided I'm going to ask questions, and I'm going to not be embarrassed to ask questions. And so that's one of the first rules in any classes I teach, anything I do with people. Please ask questions. The chances are somebody else has that same question. And you know what I found when I ask questions, people sometimes go, oh, I'm glad you asked that question. Oh, good questions. At times I don't know, because one, I don't know because it wasn't very clear. Two, I don't know because this is beyond my area of expertise. So mathematics, for example, is vast. I am a mathematician in one area, and there's a lot of other stuff. And if you expect me to answer questions on understand algebraic geometry, it's not going to happen because I don't have enough of a background to understand that. So at some point for me, what's helpful is accepting I don't know, to being able to ask questions. And then you may have heard, I don't know, you're a child of the universe. It may sound cheesy. You're a child of the universe, no less than the trees and the stars. You have a right to be here. I have a right to be where I am. And so I don't try and let people take that away from me. But you may have to have that conversation with yourself several times. You have a right to be here. You have a right to ask questions. You have a right not to know. How could you know? Just magically? No. So you have a right not to know because you've never been told, you've never read about it, you never studied it. You have a right to ask questions. So you have to give yourself that right to ask questions and to be there. You have the right to be there. So.
That's, I think, such a great way to put it. The fact that you have a right to be there, and the folks who talked last week also talked about how, at these university institutions that are, historically white male fields, sometimes folks don't feel like they belong because people aren't making them feel like they belong. And
right.
Knowing that you have the right to be there and that you have the right to learn and do what
Yep.
you need to do.
You have a right to be there, and you have so make your space and make your place. And sometimes it's hard. I'm not saying it's not, but just try not to let people make you feel less. And if there's no way, let's say at a particular university, or when you go on, nothing you can do makes people treat you in a different way, then they don't need your light there. You need to go someplace else where they don't mind it shining. Okay, but I'm not saying quit, but I'm saying, you have to put great value on yourself, please. Okay. Hello.
And
now we can hear from someone else.
Yeah, you can get a break. I'm Wong.
Hi. I feel so embarrassed, and I almost didn't join when I realized that I had missed the time completely. And I decided to join because I think that there is a great lesson for all of us. And it would, so here's what happened, I am a professional and I am a mom. I have a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old. My 5-year-old daughter is here with me right now. What I have is a Zoom background, so it looks really nice. I actually just changed my shirt because this one is clean. I had just been changing my son, playing with my kids outside, totally forgot. And the moment I realized was like overcome with emotion, right? how could, and immediately actually began to criticize myself. How could I possibly forget? And how did I not plan better? And gosh, this is something that's extremely important to me. And how out of line with my intention to not show up to something that I committed to doing and to something that is important to me. And then the reality is, and here's my 5-year-old. I said to her, the moment I realized that I had missed the start of this completely by 40 minutes, I said to her, Sue, I'm so disappointed in myself. And she said, why? And I said I was going to do something. And then on the day of it, I completely forgot. And the funny thing is, I've been looking forward to it. I've been thinking about like our post on Instagram, and Katrina sent me a really beautiful, detailed document preparing me for the conversation. And here I am, 40 minutes late. I'm not wearing any makeup right now. I think had I done this the way that I had planned, maybe I would have chosen a different shirt, but at least I changed into a clean shirt. And I realized, first of all, how smart of a setup it is to have 2 professionals per session, so that if something happens to one, a dozen people are not affected and their time has not been disrespected and wasted. And then I said to Sue, okay, it's still going on. I can still catch the last bit. And so here I am, fully owning my mistake. And I do think actually it's an opportunity perhaps to say, look, in life, there are things that are going to happen, and sometimes it's going to be your fault. And it's not going to be that you're a bad person. It's not going to be that you're a stupid person. It's just that mistakes happen. And I think that one important lesson that we can learn is, what do we do when we make a mistake? And so I thought, okay, I'm gonna show up, and I'm gonna show up as I am in this moment. And perhaps there's something valuable that I can share. So thank you for your patience with me. And I do sincerely apologize for being late today.
Well, thank you for coming anyway. And it's actually maybe a timely moment that we were just talking about work-life balance, and Dr. Weeks was talking about how it's in flux, and one thing is taking over more so than another at different times. So I think that's maybe a real world example of playing with your kids and changing your kids. And,
Absolutely.
Yes.
That's And you volunteering to join us on your Saturday afternoon when you have kids who want to be played with,
and can I say the one thing about the pandemic is that everybody has now blended family life and work life. Well, right, when I say everybody, well, some, those of us who are on Zoom and from home, have blended work life and family life. It's the playing field isn't level, but everybody sees what goes on in the background. We show up to work, maybe we look like it's together or whatever, but we know that we have to be mindful of picking this one up from daycare, doing this and doing this. Now everybody has to manage the teaching of the children or the caring of the parent. And so there's some sort of greater understanding and respect and value, we hope, that comes out from the experience that especially some people have to have that they never had before, or see that they never saw before. And so that's all I wanted to say. So it's nice to meet you, Carol. Is it Carolyn or Caroline?
It's Caroline. Thank you so much for asking. And it is a pleasure to meet you too. Yeah, I am happy to talk about literally anything.
Yeah, would you like to go ahead and just introduce yourself a little bit more and what you do, and then we can kind of just like jump in together on.
Yes, I would love that. So I will start from the very, very beginning, which is to share with you that I was born in San Francisco. I am one of two girls. My little sister is now a medical doctor. She's a pediatrician, and she and her family live in California. My mom is from Hong Kong, and she moved to the United States at age 13. My dad is a Chinese guy from the Fiji Islands. He moved to the United States at age 17. They dated for 4 months at age 19 when they met at UC Berkeley. They got married, and like 12 years later, I was born. I share that because I think that for me, certainly, and I think, inescapably for each of us, our stories as who we are, as who we were as children, totally affects who we become as adults. And so what that meant for me was a number of things. One of them was my parents, they raised me to like really focus on school. So in my household, I grew up in a household where unless you were getting straight A's, that was completely not acceptable. As a mom now, I actually have a different philosophy to child raising. And I'm realizing that as the parent who does not sort of insist on some of the same things that my parents insisted on, I'm like, well, now what do I do when my kid says no? I don't want to eat my vegetables or whatever it is. So it's a journey, and the place that I came from was in a household where my sister and I were encouraged to focus totally on academics, and my parents supported us in that so much to the point where I didn't learn how to prepare a meal. I didn't learn how to really do the laundry. I didn't learn how to clean a floor, clean a toilet. And as an adult, what happened was when I was in my 20s, I'm 37, I guess I'll be 37 in September. What happened to me in my 20s was I was like good at school, and that got me many places. But that when it came to just taking care of myself, I actually had to kind of learn that, and that was hard for me. So there's all these interesting things about it. Fast forward to when I was 16 years old, my father said to me, "What do you plan to study in college?" And I said, "I don't know. I really love dance, and I'm very interested in psychology." And he said to me, "You're going to study computer science and engineering, and you're going to attend the best school you can get into." And so I applied, and I ended up going to UC Berkeley, and I studied electrical engineering, computer science. For me, it was extraordinarily difficult. I had always been good at math and science, and I found myself surrounded by peers who were also always really good at math and science. And so for me growing up, being smart and being the kid that got good grades, that was such a big part of my identity actually, and a big part of my confidence. And then when I was in college, I struggled so hard, and I had this like identity crisis. I ended up going so far as to fail a course, be put on academic probation. I ended up retaking the course, and in all of this, what might be characterized as failure. Here I am showing up 40 minutes late to a 60-minute meeting that I've committed to. So maybe there's this theme, but there's so much that I learned. There's so much that I learned about how I can try to do something super hard, and I can maybe not be super successful at it. And I can, and life has so much more ahead of whatever we're in right now. There's, assuming that we have our health, which I'm very fortunate to have my health. And at the time I did as well. But there's always more, me in college, gosh, I really struggled to become friends with my peers. I felt like I couldn't relate to these folks. And I developed a drinking problem. I'm actually 6 years sober. Yeah, so I squeak by. I say to my dad, 3 years into a 4-year program, I say, okay, now I know what I want to study. I want to study cognitive science. I think it's so cool. It's this like really interesting mix of philosophy and, biology and chemistry and computer science. And I actually go to like the dean of my college and he says, no, like you're not allowed to switch at this point. So I power through, I get my degree in electrical engineering and computer science. That was 15 years ago. And all anyone knows, unless I choose to tell them differently, is that I have a degree in electrical engineering and computer science from UC Berkeley, which is a big deal. And it was incredibly opening to me for my entire career. And I remain, perhaps as you can tell, a bit conflicted about it. So one thing that I'll say is I've never been a software developer. I've never been an engineer. I'm simply not good at those things. But I understand the concepts. I've learned to communicate effectively, both written and through speaking. I've learned to listen to other people. I find that for me in my work, it's really the value that I add. And again, a 15-year career, having personally never done software development or written code or anything like that, the value that I bring is being able to connect with people and facilitate conversations. And right now, I have an unusual job, which is as chief strategy officer at a 100-person startup that's a cybersecurity startup. I actually manage cybersecurity as well as human resources, which is very unusual. And I find in my job as human resources leader that my job is really to kind of support others. So I skipped over a bunch of stuff, and I also know that we have 5 minutes, but the truth is, if you're interested, I've had the opportunity to tell my story in lots of different forms and formats. But what I've chosen to share today is some of what I share a little less publicly and a little less out there, but which I think for a group like this is important to understand, that you can see women who have been incredibly successful in their lives and in their careers. And those lives are also filled with all sorts of mistakes and doubts and failures. And so as you go through your career and you encounter a mistake or something that you might characterize as a failure, keep on going and realize that it doesn't define you. You can choose what to do. And my career, I've always just kind of tried to do the best at whatever was right in front of me and then see what's next. So it's been very opportunistic and quite the opposite of planned.
Great, thank you for sharing. That it fits well in with what we were discussing earlier, talking about the sort of how nonlinear these paths are, and that the same is true with Dr. Week's story, that it was not this I want to do this and then you do that path, and it's always good to hear the different experiences folks have. So let's I know we only have a few minutes left, but maybe if you guys could, there's one more question from our campers that I was hoping to get to, asking about your experiences as women, and specifically women of color in your respective fields, and any difficulties you've experienced from colleagues and in your kind of respective environments. And if we can maybe talk about that briefly.
So,
cut out.
all right. So we have. I'll go a little bit quickly on this, but so sometimes I was saying to my husband, I have a hard time with these questions because my math mind goes, oh, I have no way. I only know myself, right? And this is who I am, and I've only gone through this one life, and so this, so I don't know what it would have been like. What is attributable to me being Black, me being a woman, me being whatever. I don't know. So then he's not a mathematician, says, okay, what you talk about? I said, I know I've been first at a lot of things and only, so I can tell you about that. So I probably, as an undergraduate, I was the only Black person in my class except for my literature classes. Okay, so grad student, I was the only, in my program, I was only Black graduate student. At my university, I'm the first Black person in my department as a faculty member. I'm the second Black tenure track faculty member at my university. I'm the first Black full professor at my university, okay? And, right, and what I can say is I feel like I've done okay. And what I do is try and work so that part of what initiatives I'm involved in, things I do, make it so that other people, younger people, are not the only of anything, right? Because for some, being the only can be lonely for some, okay? I didn't mean to make a country song, but only can be lonely. And so it'd be great to it not be an issue, right? Not be the only, not be the first or whatever. So that translation is to make sure that there are more girls coming in to do math and science or whatever, or to more Black girls coming in to do, or more Latino girls coming in to do math and science, and staying through and persisting, not just trying it, but actually staying through, okay? And so that's something I just wanted to say. And I'm gonna let Ms. Wong go next.
Cool. I think something that I noticed is that if I walk into a room and I am the only or one of a very few, everyone like knows me, right? Everyone knows my name. Everyone's paying attention to what I'm doing. And something that I've observed throughout my career is that if I do something and others perceive it to be good, then there's almost this magnification effect because I look different of like, oh, Caroline, she's very good, and people remember me because I look different. However, I've seen it where a woman makes a mistake and it's a totally regular sized, normal mistake. And the magnification applies there as well. And they say, oh, Caroline, she's not very good. She's, and so that was something that I thought was really interesting. And that I learned to use. Now, what do I mean by that? Today's not a good example, but many times, most of the time, hopefully, when I do what I intend to do, I show up extra prepared for stuff. And that means that when the opportunity for me to shine occurs, I try to take advantage of that opportunity. And then I get that positive magnification factor. Briefly, I will say that I've been bullied, and that has been not fun. I've had male peers of mine not only team up against me, make a plan together to make me look like a fool in front of our team, but they also told me about it afterwards. And the whole thing was very unpleasant. And at the time, I didn't really talk about it. I'd sort of just tried to move on. And I think if I could go back, I would have told someone about it. And it didn't have to be my boss that I would have told. My boss wouldn't have cared anyway. He was a bad boss. But it could have been a friend. It could have been my sister. It could have been a therapist. What I chose actually was to drink. And I realize this is the second time now I've brought up drinking, but I do think it's important because for me personally, when I've encountered difficult moments in my life, there have been times when I've turned to a really nice cocktail or glass of wine. And now I know that actually that doesn't help me solve a problem. That doesn't help me get to the other side. That just actually kind of holds me still in the moment of discomfort. The other thing that's really interesting is I think that in the cybersecurity field, certainly there's a lot of conferences, not these days because pandemic, but these conferences have like tons of booze. And you can imagine like a group of 10,000 people, 90% of whom are male, and everyone's drinking heavily. And at 11 p.m., people start to act in ways that are not appropriate in all sorts of different directions. And there's sometimes it's really fun, and sometimes it's like not so fun. So those things happen, and I would welcome if anyone wanted to reach out to me anytime. I'd be happy to follow up on any of these topics.
So I know we're out of time.
If you're happy to stay and chat, we're happy to.
I would love to stay.
Yeah, but that,
to people leave.
no, that one point about, so part of being the only, right, is that there could be that hyper focus, right? And so, and part of when I say I've only been me, there's so many things that are just internalized that unless you do have that deep reflection, or unless, for me, it's enjoying the writings of other people who have been able to reflect and articulate those things about that shine a light on your own being and your own existence. The fact that, and so you hear the story as especially this year, again, Black Lives Matter and all these things, about having to be hyper vigilant, right? So there's one class or one group of people in this country have to be hyper vigilant, especially in some situations, right? And then as a woman or a person who's not white, in certain situations, you have to be hyper prepared or hyper whatever, because you get more focus because of what you look like, right? And so the solution has been over preparation or hyper preparation or more anxiety and things like that. And so we have to be aware of this. And I think that for some of us, we don't even think about it. It just is the way it is, but we must think about that and realize, okay, that may not be exactly fair. And I know sometimes when I go, if I switched this male to female or female to male or black to white or whatever, would this have worked this way? And when I can answer no, that's something that I realize, okay, well, something was not quite right there. If the answer is different when I switch genders or ethnicities or class or income and all these sorts of things. So one has to be careful about that. I mean, and you don't want to spend your whole day pouncing and doing those switches, but as leaders, as managers, right? Not just as workers, not just the people here, but we have to look at the structure, and those people in power in my opinion, have to be doing that exercise to make it easier for all of us to thrive. To make it easier for all of us to thrive. So, okay.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, that's so important. And important for, like you said, for people that don't.
In just a minute, Bob.
Well, I think with that, we should probably end it there, since we're a few minutes after 4 where I am. That's where folks are joining from. But thank you both for coming and for talking and sharing your stories.
Thank you so much for having me, Katrina, and for inviting me. So this was a pleasure.
Yes, it's nice to talk with you both, and thank you for deciding to come in the end.
You're very welcome. You're doing great work, and I'm so happy that this program exists. And I would like to continue to support it however I can.
Great, thank you. Okay, well, that is it for today. And for anyone who's interested, next week on Saturday, we'll be having a college admissions panel. And as I said before, you can go to girlstalkmath.com to find out more information about that.